Welcome to the voice of Bold Business Radio, the show about ways to stay competitive in a changing market, break through business plateaus, and respond to the changing expectations of today's customers. Your host, Jess Dewell, is a rapid growth entrepreneur, consultant, and business advocate with a 20-year track record of business excellence. She candidly discusses how to achieve your growth strategy and realize your company's unfulfilled potential. Now, here's Jess.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I got up this morning like too early. The sun wasn't even starting to rise, and it is past the winter solstice. And I got myself around, and I put myself in the car, and I drove from Boulder to Castle Rock, Colorado. And I did that because they are having an expo here today for Douglas County. And I have to tell you, I am here because of their keynote speaker, Justin Patton. So before I introduce you to him and he actually gets to say anything, then we need to just start with the most important piece. We are using hashtag VBB Radio. We are live streaming right now on Facebook, on Justin's Facebook, and on the Voice of Bold Business YouTube channel. So to join in the conversation, hashtag VBB Radio. You are in the right place for conversations about current needs that we as business leaders face. It might be technology. It might be customer expectations. It might be growth and quickly changing competitive market. Oh, I already said changing, so, you know, whatever. We're going to just go with it. This program is about what it means to reach short-term goals and increase confidence in our long-term positioning. It's Communicate for Impact Today, Program 197. Justin Patton is an international speaker and executive coach. Justin challenges leaders to think differently. By the way, he did that for me too, and you'll probably hear a story, at least a little bit of one today. And in addition to thinking differently, we must also think about our presence, how that impacts trust, how that impacts our credibility, and how that impacts our performance. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Oh my gosh. So it was totally worth getting up early because not only did we have a nice breakfast, but we were chatting as I was getting in line and I felt very torn. I didn't know if you noticed, and it was so funny. I was reflecting. I was like, well, I want to look at you, but I'm in this line. But I want to look at you, but I'm in this line to eat my breakfast.
Yeah.
And so I want to know, as a communication expert, as somebody who's thinking about presence and executive presence all the time, what are the top 3 things that we need to be thinking about?
One is, I would tell people, stop worrying about everyone else's body language and focus on yourself. And I find that sometimes we get so caught up in trying to analyze people and read everyone else's body language that we're not really paying attention to maybe the best practices or staying true to how we want to be perceived. So that would be number 1. Mm-hmm. Number 2, I would say, get really clear about how you want to be perceived by people. What is your brand? So one of the things in the exercises I do with people that I coach is I'll say to them, tell me if there were 3 words on how you want to be perceived by people, what would those 3 words be? Because I think one of the dangers that we do is, as coaches, I don't ever want to try to change someone or make them someone they're not. What I hope we do is help them be more of who they are at their best. So help me understand, who do you want to be? So when people talk about you, all of you watching, when people talk about you, what are the 3 words you hope they say? And then once you're clear about those 3 words, is to be able to say, you know what, then how does my body language or the words that I use or my intensity, all of that, help me be more of that individual? Mm-hmm. And the last thing I would say, the core of all communication is just self-awareness. Mm-hmm. And how do we, over time and experience, just really cultivate stronger self-awareness in who we are and how to also read other people as well.
Can I tell you a story?
Tell me immediately.
Okay, because the 3 words, you hear variations of that, and I've never heard exactly 3 words. So I'm sitting, and I was thinking about this. I heard something, and then I went to a networking event. I went to a place where people know me. I went to a place that I've been going to for years. And you know, there's this time in these meetings where we get to say nice things about people. And here we are, saying nice things about people, and somebody says, Jess, she just lights up the room, and she's so nice. And then they stopped. And you know what I did? I said, and I help you kick butt and grow your business. Yeah. Because I was like, well, I can't be the nice girl and achieve the growth that I actually achieve at the same time. So there was a big gap that had to be closed, instantaneous. And from that moment on, I've never been called nice again.
Yeah. But isn't it interesting that sometimes I think the stories that we create, that like you create a story, I can't be nice and be successful in business.
Right.
Based on whose standard, right?
Well, but I already am nice.
Yeah.
That's okay. And I don't mind people saying it, but I do want them, if they're talking about what I do in business, to be talking about the fact that I grow. Yeah. The fact that I grow businesses.
Well, and I what I honor about that story too, I also think about my 3 words are about how I show up in the world all the time, or at least to my best.
Yeah.
But to me, to your point, being nice and kind is who you are. Yes. It's how you create great businesses. And so to me, once you know your words, that is your way of taking responsibility for your energy and how you get results, how you lead, how you have a successful relationship. It's interesting when I work with these executives, I'll ask them, how do you want to be perceived? No one in my entire career has ever said, I hope people say I'm condescending, arrogant, and egotistical. No one's ever said that, right? But you've all had that family member, that leader in your company that maybe did show up that way. Yeah. And it was like, what is the truth of who you are? And how do you get back to that person?
So there's a big wall there. It's almost like I don't want anybody to see.
Yeah.
And now, how did you decide that you were going to be, did this find you? This whole realm of communication and impact. No. Did you decide, I want to go communicate and be better at helping people communicate? How did it happen?
I got it really wrong a lot.
Oh.
Yeah. So
hard knocks.
Yeah, very much. Yeah. So for me, Elizabeth Gilbert has this quote that I just love. She says, the most interesting moment of a person's life is what happens to them when all their certainties go away. Then who do you become? And for me, that was on September 19th in 1998. So
do you know the time?
I do not know the time.
I was like, that was very specific.
Yeah, well, it's because it was significant, right? And we all have that day in our life or that moment or that year where everything that was certain became uncertain. And I had started college a month before, Eastern Kentucky University, thought I was going to law enforcement and the FBI. And my dad, who had been in the Air Force, was in Vietnam, we grew up on a farm. He could fix anything. So in my eyes, this he's like that champion in my life, right? Indestructible. Had surgery, was supposed to be pretty minor. And it was hemorrhoid surgery, get him in, get him out, no big deal. And that weekend of September 19th, I'd been to college for a while. So I decided to come home and visit my family and go to this band competition. And I remember that day, he was in a lot of pain. Mm-hmm. And we've never had someone in our family ever have surgery. So we didn't know what that process of recovery was really like. Right. But he took me to go get groceries for my college dorm room. He took me to go get my hair cut. And when I got back, Mom made lunch for us. We all sat down. And it was there at the table that he put his fork down, he tilted his head down, and he started to cry. And that was the first time in my entire life I'd ever seen my dad cry. And you're looking at him like, Dad, are you okay? And I remember getting up and going in the living room after I was finished, and I was eavesdropping on my parents. And they were like, they're on the phone with the doctor. And they said, bring him in tomorrow. We'll check him out, make sure he's okay, and we'll go from there. Mm-hmm. And fast forward, I came home that night after this band competition and found out he died in mom's arms. And after surgery, they had left galls inside of him. And so after this month and a half that we thought he was recovering was bacteria growing in his body, and it shut all of his organs down. And the reason why I want to tell you I got it wrong, because this is what happened. My dad was 46 years old when he died. I was an 18-year-old kid, and I saw how short life can be. So I was like, I'm going to make a difference. So that spurred me into my career in education, became a teacher, all that stuff. But the destructive thing that it did was, as an 18-year-old kid, I didn't know how to handle loss that painful. So I emotionally disconnected from everyone in life, including myself, for 12 years. So I led teams that way. I showed up on teams and led projects, and I think I was a bully. I got great results. And organizations kept rewarding my bad behavior. So as long as I got results for them, they didn't care. And they kept rewarding it. But I was eroding the culture. I was eroding engagement. All my relationships in my life, personal and professional, were transactional. So the moment I got what I needed, I was kind of on to the next thing. So there was no empathy, because I didn't have empathy for myself or intimacy. And then about 30, I hit kind of rock bottom in a career, pushed out of a career I loved. And it was at that moment where I'm like, I think so many people know they can play bigger. They just don't know how. Mm-hmm. And I go, this is how I started my business. I said, if you ever want to be a great leader of other people, you better first be a great leader of yourself. And I wasn't. And I had to get some feedback. I had to ask some tough questions that I did not want to hear, the answers to. Yeah. And I had to do my work, and it was not easy. And I think I'm still doing the work, but I've been able to use the platform now to hopefully just share some insights to people about what worked for me, what helped turn my life around, and now the clients that I get to work with.
I find this fascinating because there is that moment. And I challenge everybody that's listening. You know, we usually are a business show, and we are a business show, but I'm curious, can you name the exact date that you knew something was different? That would be a good thing to use for your hashtag VBB Radio. When did my life change because I chose it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to either way, right? To your point of when that moment, everything was certain became uncertain, where maybe it was that you lost someone you love, or maybe the job got eliminated, or you had a big falling out in a relationship or a manager, or to your point, the opposite, where everything changes because you were given an opportunity, which we've all had those moments. But how do we show up when things are going hard? That to me is what I care about. It's easy to show up our best self when things are going well. We're here today. We're having fun.
That's right.
It's easy for me to communicate effectively. Mm-hmm. But what do I do when the person cuts me off in the car? What do I do when the person gets my order wrong, or they're just rude, and or my perception is they're inconsiderate? Mm-hmm. How do I show up then? That's my character. That's when it matters. Mm-hmm. And so I've had those moments where I've gotten that wrong. But what's happened is over the years, I've shortened the time between how long I stay there. And if I don't, and I always tell people this, our job in communication is not to always get it right. But when we don't get it right, do we slow down long enough to make it right? That's the difference, because there's some people that I call them sleepwalkers. Yeah. They're walking around, they're sleepwalking. They have no clue on how their presence and words are impacting other people. And our job is to wake up and stop being a sleepwalker and recognize that when we don't get it right, we can stop at any moment and try to make it right.
All right. So I have so many things going through my brain. Okay. So the first is, I know, right? I'm thinking about the leaders that I've worked with in the last 3 years. Mm-hmm. We could go back farther than that, but I have very key people that are popping up, and I'm like, okay. So we've got leaders that are out there, and if you recognize this, you may have this trait. By the way, some of these are my traits. I'm not going to tell you which is which, because that would just make it no fun. And it is, this concept of shutdown. When we shut down, we just automatically go at arm's length. And I know this is actually something that I learned as a child. So, okay, I just outed myself. That when it gets too hard, what do? I just shut down and go away. Mm-hmm. Total avoidance. That doesn't help anything. And that actually makes the next step of conversation, the one that we have to have when we actually have to fess up, maybe apologize, maybe go, that person was right. Maybe go, I was right, but boy, did I act mean.
Yeah.
That makes it harder, is what I found over time. And so then we get to that point where, well, I can't go back now. Now what? So there are those of you out there, I can't go back now. I can't say I'm sorry. So if we feel like we're in that place, how could we make that first step in coming to terms with the fact we have anxiety and fear around it, and we want to make it right, even though it's been a really long time?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you a couple thoughts.
Love it.
One for me is communication is often uncomfortable. And I don't care what it is. I'm going to give you a scenario.
Yeah.
I was just on the Delta flight this week, and a guy got on the plane, went right past me, put his luggage in the overhead compartment, walked back up, talked to the captain, and walked off the plane. Now, I don't know about you all, but if you fly, we've been trained. You do not get off the plane. They would have tackled us. Yeah. Just we would not have gotten off the plane, right?
Exactly right.
So I try to be really observant, my surroundings. They say, see something, say something. I'm like, I'm seeing something. Do I say something?
Do you really want me to say something?
Yeah. So I wait for 10 minutes and he never gets back on the plane. Oh. So now I have a decision because I'm in my seat and I'm worried. And then I start thinking of all the things that could happen.
Yeah.
And do you ever watch that movie Ghost?
Yes.
And when she's like, Molly, you in danger, girl. That's what I kept thinking. Like, you in danger. Everybody, we in danger right now. Yeah. And I had to make a decision. I didn't want to be, I know this is hard to believe, but I didn't want to be dramatic. And I didn't want to say something around everyone. So I was uncomfortable. I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to be embarrassed because I knew it probably was nothing. But I ended up going back and going up to the front of the plane. And I said, hey, and I told her about the guy that got on the plane. And I was like, he got on, talked to the captain, and he left. And she's like, oh, he's sitting in the, in the jump seat in the cockpit. I guess he's a pilot. It was flying. What happened was instantly I had clarity, and with clarity became relief. And so what I tell people is what makes communication effective is clarity. And often getting to that clarity is uncomfortable and it's not easy and it doesn't feel good. And it challenges us to take risk and to say, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have talked to you that way and I got it wrong. Listen, this, we're in a relationship or this marriage, and I feel like we're at a point where we have become more roommates than partners.
Yeah.
And I want to make it different. Or in leadership and in business, to be able to say, I have an idea and I don't really know how to express it, but I just want to run it by you and get your thoughts. How do we step up, and when it's uncomfortable, knowing that the clarity that we will receive with clarity become our clarity of our thoughts, clarity of our feelings, all drive action. It might not always be the action we want, but clarity will always lead to action. And when we have that, we know the next right answer.
So what about the people who just have never had a good role model out there, right? And they don't know, right? You alluded to it with your dad. He was your hero. You had no idea that he could be anything else other than he was.
Yeah.
Well, people might think of us that way. And so if we're looking at this self-reflection and self-awareness piece as a leader, how do we ensure that the question totally eluded me. Do you know where I was going? Can you pull it out of my brain?
Well, I'm going to say something. I'm like,
Good.
No one is coming to save you. No one is coming to save you in your relationship.
Yep.
No one's coming to save you as a leader. No one's coming to save you in your job. And so part of it is we have to save ourselves. And that starts with self-awareness. It starts by understanding and having really good truth tellers around us that can have our back, tell us the truth, and help us in that journey.
Okay. How do we find those truth tellers?
So build authentic relationships.
Okay.
And so everyone's like, oh, go network with people. And I think network's important because I do think with exposure comes influence.
Yes.
But Stephen Covey coined this term around emotional deposits. And for anyone that's watching, maybe hasn't heard that term around emotional deposits, he says that in every relationship in our life, business, personal, doesn't matter, there's a bank account of trust between you and me.
Yeah.
And our job as leaders is to make sure that we are depositing into that bank account of trust because one day we're going to screw it up. Right? Like we're going to mess it up. But do I have enough deposits here that these people don't bail on me? And to me, the truth tellers are the relationship was never transactional. It was never about, I just get what I need and now I go away and I feel used and I feel icky. That you took a genuine interest. We both took a genuine interest in each other. And over time, we made these deposits where we developed that relationship because with that became trust. And the more trust we have, when you come to me, Jess, and you got to give me the feedback, or you say, listen, I'm really unhappy right now, or you really frustrated me, hopefully I respect the intent behind what you're telling me and I don't have to get super defensive because we already built the trust. But if your manager has never coached you and never given you feedback, and then all of a sudden comes to you and now there's a big problem, you failed them as a leader. Because now you haven't developed the relationship, and now you're going to come to them and give them this feedback when now they're going to anybody would question, well, where's this coming from? Why all of a sudden now? Why didn't you give me the praise that I needed before or should have had or the constructive criticism or feedback? So we don't get to pick and choose. If we're going to be great leaders, we've got to develop authentic relationships, and we got to be able to do that through creating these emotional deposits with people.
Interesting. And it takes time.
Yeah, a lot of time often.
Yeah.
It's not quick. I do think there are simple, easy things, whether it's just, we know one of the top drivers of engagement is recognition.
Yeah.
So how easy is it at work? I don't know how many of you are watching, but I would even say for all of you, how many of you been in a job where you just feel that you didn't feel appreciated, or you didn't feel like you got the recognition you deserved, or someone took it from you? And how easy is it, whether it's just a verbal thing in front of a room, whether it's sending them a thank you card or a little note, there's so little ways that we can show people recognition and make these deposits. It doesn't have to be grandiose things.
And in a world of instant gratification, we automatically go to the grandiose.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then usually it's overdone, right? And then whoever's receiving that, it's like, who is this? What did I do? It's kind of creepy. It's not, so there's a bigger opportunity for missed connection when it's not consistent, is what I hear you say.
Yeah. Well, and I think we get busy being busy.
Yeah.
There's an article, it went viral. It's from a mom to her daughter, and it was about the day I stopped saying, hurry up. And that was all she said. Hurry up, get dressed, hurry up, get in bed, right? Hurry up, all these things. And she goes, I think I say hurry up more than I love you. And I think whether it's personal or professional, we do that in work and we do it at home. And maybe sometimes in the busyness of all the work, we don't coach the way we need to. We don't build the relationships the way we should. And then we wonder why businesses are failing, or why managers aren't successful, because they stop focusing on the relationships and they put the results before people.
We're going to come back to that in just a minute. First, we have a question from Kelly. This came by email, which is radio@reddirection.com. How do we know, Justin, that we communicate effectively?
So, hey, Kelly, first of all,
Yeah.
listen, it's kind of what I would hinted at earlier. To me, communication is effective when it creates clarity. That doesn't mean you're going to like the clarity, right? That means, right? I mean, you might not like it.
True. I love that you say that.
Yeah.
People always assume clarity equals happiness or contentment or something positive. And I love that you say that.
Yeah. Well, because maybe there's something. So one of the top factors that build trust is transparency.
Yeah.
At least when the organization is going through a reorg and there's clarity about what the next steps are, I can make an informed decision.
Right.
I might not like the decision. I might not like the policy that's being issued or the reorganization that's happening, or I might not like that my partner is really struggling in this relationship. But when I have clarity about why, and then I get to say, do I get to make a decision? Is this the right next step for me to stay in this relationship? Or is it the right to get out? So to me, it's all about clarity. Clarity drives action. And so effective communication has to have clarity in it.
All right. Let's see. Here we have another question from Eric. If communication is uncomfortable, how can we be clear without being rude?
I love that, Eric.
I know.
Number one thing, are you ready for this? You better write this one down.
Write this down.
It's what I shared today in the keynote is manage your intensity. And there is a fine line between being transparent versus maybe being, I think assertiveness in leadership, emotional intelligence is good. But I see a lot of people where their assertiveness crosses over into intensity, and intensity becomes destructive because that's when people go into fight or flight. They stop listening. They feel like they have to defend their position. So how do we just be clear and own and say, this is what I feel, this is what I believe, but leave the intensity out of it. Just be direct in the process. Do you know those people in life, and Eric, I will say this, you know those people that say, well, I just tell people how it is. I'm direct. I just tell them how it is, right? And I say this to people, those people, what are they really telling you? And I think what they're telling you is they're bullies. They're bullies and they're inconsiderate to people. Because when I say, I just tell people how it is, well, you did that at the cost of other people sometimes. You didn't keep them whole. Right. You didn't think about how do you deliver your truth with tact? That to me is the difference. I can still deliver it and do it the same way.
When you said, I wrote down, this is just, in quotes, this is just the way I am. I wrote down, that just becomes an excuse to not show up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I love that you call them bullies. You know who you are. By the way, sometimes I'm that way. Well, and, I mean, we all are, right?
Well, can I say something about that? In one of the workshops I teach in leadership, I talk about what is the number one trait. I want to ask all my people watching right now on Facebook Live and over here with Jess, when you think about the number one trait that holds leaders back, what do you think it is? I just want you to put it in the comment section.
Yeah.
So in the comments, chat, whatever. Perfect. And then I'm going to give you like 10 seconds. If you could say there was one trait above all these other traits, what do you think is actually holding leaders back?
I'm not going to answer.
Okay.
However, I can't wait to hear the things that come in because I think it's going to be a wide range.
Yeah.
And it tells us a lot about you who's answering, because it's probably a place that we must work on a little bit too, or that we've had such a strong experience in some sort of a reaction. So I can't wait to hear what the thing is, since there's such a spectrum. Yeah. Okay. Do we have any?
Are we ready? So John, it says being unapproachable. Ooh. Yeah. You know, I hear a lot of people say lack of trust. John talks about being closed off. Yeah. People talk about lying, lack of character, not being, all those types of things. So here it is. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds, still put your response in, but the number one trait based on all my coaching, and I think there's some research to support it, is ego. And we all have it. And that's the thing I always tell people. I'll be in a room full of people and I'm like, if anyone starts checking out here, you're the one I worry about, because we all have it. I have it. You have it. Yeah. It's about learning to have the self-awareness to recognize when it's starting to get the best of us. Ooh. And so I want to define ego from my crazy perspective. So in the book that I just wrote, I wrote a whole chapter about keep your ego in check. Mm-hmm. But when you ask people, so Jess, you tell me this, when you ask people about people that really show up with ego, do you think inside they really are confident or lack confidence?
I think they lack.
Everyone will tell you that. Everyone thinks people with confidence really lack, or people with ego lack confidence. However, they might project extreme confidence sometimes. Yes. Here's why.
Okay.
So my definition of ego It is any fear-based thought. It is always rooted in fear. Any fear-based thought that pulls you out of alignment to the truth of who you are. That is why that exercise that we did in the beginning is so important. At my best, I am kind. At my best, I am confident. And at my best, I hope I'm present with people. Yes. I know when I walk away from that. So give you the quick story I often share in my keynote about when I got it really wrong. Yeah. Another airport story. I must be in the airport a lot, but it was Toronto airport, going through security, got through. TSA agent was checking a man's backpack. All the bins were lined up so no one's bag could come out. So I wait patiently for her to get done. She gets done, hands the man his backpack. I go to slide all the trays down, and all of a sudden she goes and grabs the bins really quick, so I couldn't push the bins down. Yeah, well, you know, I'm very Southern, okay? So in my, jerked up, and in my head, I was like, bless her heart. No, she did not do that. And if you all don't know what bless your heart really means,
I love that you're
that really means you're an idiot, okay? But Southern people are very polite. They won't tell you that. So oh, honey, you fell down those stairs and broke your legs. Bless your heart. They're really telling you're dumb, okay? But without even thinking about it, I snapped up and I was like, bless her heart. No, she did not just do that. And without thinking, unconsciously, I said, well, I'll show her. So I stacked all the bins on top of one another, slid them down and said, fine, I'll do your job for you. Didn't go well with TSA. I do not recommend that for anybody. But what happened is we yelled at each other. I stepped 20 steps down the terminal and I stopped, Jess. I teach people for a living to take responsibility for their energy. And I didn't. And I walked out of the truth of who I was. I wouldn't have had the awareness had I not known how I want to show up. Had I just been living life, doing the best I could, I would have given myself excuses. But I know I want to be present. I want to be, inspiring or empathetic and confident. I didn't do any of that. Right. And so I made a decision. We don't always get it right, but we get a chance to make it right. Yeah. I went back. She's turned around, I go, excuse me, ma'am. She turns to me and she goes, what? And I go, uncomfortable. I need to tell you I'm sorry. You did not deserve the way that I talked to you and I owe you an apology. She looks right at me and goes, well, I don't accept your apology. I closed my eyes and I just got myself back together because in my head, I was like, bless her heart. No, she did not do that, right? But in that moment, I was able to keep it together. And I said, but now I'm in the truth of who I am. I said to her, you don't have to accept it, but I feel like I owe that to you. And I just want to tell you that. Yeah. And I said, I hope you have a good day. And I am not lying to y'all. She looks right at me and goes, well, I hope you have a bad one, and walks away. Right? I'm like, who does that to people? But
I know a couple. Yeah. Unfortunately.
But the whole point of that, right, is ego was all fear-based. When I made that decision, it was out of fear. It was out of I need to be right in this moment. I wasn't trying to understand or be empathetic. I was more concerned with being right. And I walked out of the truth of who I was. That is all ego. So we all have it. It is about understanding how it's showing up when we become super critical, judgmental, when we're not present for people, when we don't take accountability for actions, all ego-based.
All right. It's program 197. We are talking about Communicate for Impact with our special guest, Justin Patton. Remember, you're already using it. Hashtags, comments, wherever you happen to be, join us in this conversation. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the voice of Bold Business Radio. In every program, we share stories, tips, and concepts that benefit short-term goals and increase confidence in long-term positioning. Stay current and receive programs to continue sparking ideas about growth strategy by subscribing to the program at voiceofboldbusiness.com. Now, back to Jess.
All right. We share something in common.
Tell me.
Besides really good taste and being colorful,
I was going to say the colors.
We're very vibrant colors. Is that we both talk about action. We both believe that action is core to everything. Do you start from action and work backwards? Do you go from other things and get to the action? Because I always start with action.
Yeah. So I think it's twofold. Yeah. One of the things that I shared earlier today was about mindset. And from a coaching perspective, we know that thoughts lead to feelings, feelings lead to actions. So here's an example. When someone has the thought, oh my gosh, I'm fat, what do they do? That's the thought. They get depressed. They get overwhelmed. And what do they do as a result? They eat more. Right? So thoughts lead to feelings, feelings lead to actions. In business, this is what I have found. So it's interesting that you're asking this question. Oftentimes in coaching, when they're like, well, I don't want to be a jerk. I don't want to be a bully. I want to show up a different way, but I don't know how. Of course, long term, my job is to help switch their thoughts because we know that'll switch their feelings. Feelings lead to actions. But what I find is that initial reaction is so hard to you've years of programming.
Right.
So to change that in like 1 week when we need to create some quick wins for you to be successful is hard. So what I do is we say, okay, tell me about a leader that is successful, someone who communicates really well. What are the actions that he or she does? And we list a bunch of them. And then we'll start with action. So if you could take 1 or 2 actions this week that you could commit to live more in that space, because you say that's who you want to be. You might not know how to do it yet.
Right.
What would you do? And then what I say, and I actually say this in my book, you do the action until your mindset catches up with the boldness of your actions, right? So if you want to have a better marriage, what do people that are successful in relationships do? And how do I start doing just some of those actions, even if it doesn't feel natural, even if it's uncomfortable, because that is the person I want to be. I'm just not there yet. But what happens is as they start to do the actions, they start to see the results. Yes. And the moment they see the benefits, they're like, this is actually working. Yeah. And then they start to change their thoughts. Yeah. And when that happens, everything else starts to change.
Isn't that interesting? Because I'm always, and even, okay, and I don't know how you are. So when you said any time in your life, so when you said whatever you said at any point in time, right? I'm going to do this. Does it begin with, I'm going to do this, and then we think the thoughts of how to get there for you?
Say that one more time. I want to take it in.
Okay. So I'm going to use myself as an example because I'm always, hey, that's a cool idea. Let's go do it. And then I'll do it for a while, bring everybody along that needs to be brought along, wants to be brought along, is excited to be brought along. And then we take a step back and we evaluate what just happened. And so, and that's in everything. It's in relationship, it's in play, it's in cooking, it's in shopping, whatever day-to-day stuff, as well as negotiations, buying organizations, figuring out how do you make interpersonal communications change, or how do you get to that next big infrastructure support system, that's the support system that you want to be updated within your organization. Usually it takes an action. I am going to do it. Is in an organization, somebody's got to take the lead and decide to be the line leader to move it forward. So that's an action, the step up to step into the place. And then everything else can fall into place. I call that act to plan. And people are like, I just want to plan. I just want to think about it. I'm like, how long are you going to think about it before you're willing to make that, or ask somebody else to step up and get that done? Do you see what I mean?
I do. I agree. I fundamentally, the people that play small in life, because they don't take action,
right?
Or they put it off, or they excuse themselves out of their own greatness and excuse themselves, make all the excuses of why they can't go to the gym, or why they can't get the promotion, or why they can't go back to school. And at some point, you stop making excuses for yourself, and you say, there's a great speaker. I don't know if his name's like DeWitt Jones, but he said a line. He goes, I'm not worried about getting it right 5 years from now. Right. I'm looking for the next right answer. And what I tell people is, quit trying to figure it out a year from now. But we all know the next right answer. You know when it's time to stay in the job. You know when it's time to leave. You know when you feel in your intuition when it's time to invest back in your relationship because you've kind of gotten away from it, or I want to go back to school. You always know the right next step. And what happened in my career, I always honored the next right step. And anytime I got to that point where it didn't feel right, I said, okay, what's the next right step? And then I got the clarity I needed and I took action. And then I just took it as far as it could go. And then what happened? The next right answer would come up as well.
Okay. I really am glad you shared this, because everybody who's listening to the show, either now or later, you will be in a place where you will be asked to project forward 1 year, 5 years, or 10 years, depending on where you're at and what you're trying to do. And we don't know.
No.
And so that's okay.
What a disservice we do to especially kids going to school. What do you want to do the rest of your life?
Oh yeah.
I don't even know, right? I mean, I have a vision, I have an idea, but what happens is we lock people in, and we don't give them, they feel like if I change it, then I'm not good enough, or this is inappropriate, or, and I'm like, just focus. I want you to have a vision, and I do want you to have goals for your organization,
you need that,
or for yourself. What is your vision for how you want to be perceived as a leader? But at the end of the day, what is the next right step for helping me be more of that?
Exactly. And that's actually, there's a vision in that, because it goes back to, whether it's personally with the 3 words, it goes back to the vision, mission, and values within a company, that the next right step is rooted in that, as well as 10 years down the road, it's still rooted in that, but the actual action or the product or the way we do our business or the way that our roles are changing as technology changes, it's going to look really different, but we can still do what we do. I mean, take Nintendo. They started out playing, making card games to bring generations together in the 1800s. I don't think people understand that Nintendo existed before consoles.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, I was a high school teacher for 5 years.
Yeah.
Had I only been on that path and never listened to the next right answer, when opportunities came along, I wouldn't have been available to them. And so an opportunity came up and I'm like, this feels right. This feels like the next right answer. And here's the deal. Most often, we can always go back.
Always.
Right?
Yes.
And so or I can make another next right answer.
Exactly.
And so to me, it's all about forward movement. And if you're at a place in your life where you feel stagnant in anything, I would say my challenge to you is, what is the next right answer for you? And how do you do that? And what does that look like to help move you forward?
All right. I have so many things. I'm just looking at my notes. You can see everybody. I mean, you should see how I write. I'm actually only using one color today. Usually that's why I brought out all my colored pens.
Very colorful.
Yes, always, because they end up meaning something, but I don't necessarily see what they mean until the end when I'm reviewing everything. And that's it. I think sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And when we're willing to embrace that, that's also an element of self-awareness. Now, how does self-awareness tie into the book that you've just published?
Yeah. So the book I'm publishing, it comes out next week on the 22nd. Whoop, whoop. Yeah, it's been 5 years in the making, right?
Yeah.
But it's called Bold New You, and it's 6 breakthroughs to playing bigger in leadership, business, and life. And the reason I did that was I really wanted to create a book to help people become better leaders of themselves.
Yes.
And for me and my journey and the executives and leaders that I've coached, what were some of the core strategies or steps, or I call them breakthrough steps, that really help them develop that self-awareness and become a better leader of themselves? So an example, the first chapter is take care of you first. Because I know a lot of leaders who take care of everyone else in their life, and the last person they invested in is themselves. And then they're depleted, and then they don't show up their best for anyone.
Right.
I think we might have some contradiction here with some people on the call. I have some people are like, we talk about servant leadership. And I think we have that conversation backwards. To me, it's always like, be there for other people. And I'm like, servant leadership to me is about a people first mindset. Well, I'm part of that equation too.
Yes.
And I don't remove myself from that equation.
Yes.
I'm always going to be there for other people.
Yep.
But I'm not going to do it at the jeopardy of me, because when I do it, when I hurt myself in the process, now I don't show up best for you. So taking care of you first, I talk about keeping your ego in check, taking responsibility for your energy, owning your voice, living in purpose, and acting like a champion. And those are the 6 kind of core chapters. And there's 22 exercises throughout the book. So when I wrote it, I was like, I don't want it to just be, a bunch of just, those people, you read books and it's great information, but it's like, well, now how do I apply it? Like, what do I do with it?
Yes.
And so I wanted to create a book where there were actual strategies or activities to say, okay, I like this, but how do I do it? And there's the how is actually in the book.
That's fantastic. And you're right. And okay, so in today's world, we are being programmed to need those small doses of happiness inserted. And there's a word of what your brain makes. You used this
oxytocin and the dopamine, endorphins, and all that stuff.
Yes, that, right? And so we're requiring more and more instant feedback. Yet the work you're talking about, the work that I do, is the exact opposite. And so I think this practice of gratitude is also can sometimes be egotistical. So when we're working on that self-awareness and we're working on this gratitude, and when we're working on each of these things, how can we do a quick check-in? Give us a quick check-in of, well, where's my ego in all of this? What is my purpose for doing this, to make sure I know what I'm looking for in the next right step?
Yeah. Well, so I think a couple things. One for me is, this is where I think it's really important to have truth tellers in your life again, right? So one is, you do need truth tellers that you can check in with to say, are you seeing a difference? Because if someone doesn't really know me, they might not see the change.
Yeah.
But I honor that feedback. So number one is, I do think you need those truth tellers, whether it's a partner, a family member, friends, people at work, that you can ask about.
Yeah.
If you are trying to show up different in meetings in business, maybe if you're my good friend, my coworker, maybe I tell you, hey, Jess, in this meeting, I'm really going to try to listen more than I talk. And when I do talk, I'm going to try to really take people with me versus just kind of railroading the conversation. Would you give me some feedback after the meeting? To me, that's an action that's going to give me that immediate feedback. But people will help you if they know how to help you. But oftentimes they don't know, or we just ask them for general feedback and they're like, oh, no, you're great. Thanks.
Ooh, yeah.
And so can we be really specific about the feedback that we're really looking for?
Got it.
And I don't know, I guess what comes up for me, Jess, is celebrate the small wins. So it's not this work that we do, it is hard work and it is long and I'm still working on it. Right. And I hope I continue to get better and better, but
it'll never end.
No,
I don't see that journey ending for me.
Right. And so to me, when you make one decision to take a little bit better care of yourself, celebrate it.
Yeah.
Right. Be proud of yourself. Learn to give yourself your own validation, because what we do is we manipulate and use other people to give what we don't give ourselves. And part of what we need to do is learn to start filling our bucket a little bit ourselves. It's great. I do think other people should do that as well, but we don't have to rely on it to feel whole. That's the difference.
Yes. Intrinsic lifelong learning is really what comes to mind as you're saying this. I'm reading a book. It was probably published 40 years ago. It might've been, as I was born or before I was born, but it still matters because it's how do you set up an environment that the leader or the teacher is learning as much as the student is there to receive and learn. And so I'm thinking about that in all of this. And maybe there are some things we're already doing in our own lives that we could pull out and go, here's where I am really good at allowing other people to show up and teach me, even when I'm leading.
Yeah. There's a famous line. I mean, I studied A Course in Miracles, and it talks about like when the teacher is ready, the students will come.
Yes.
And I believe that. And the teacher is the student. We're both.
We're all the time.
Yeah.
Which is the most one of my personal core values is curiosity. I keep hitting the table with my watch. I apologize, everybody listening.
Well,
it's like
she's excited. Your intensity.
It's a cool watch, but nonetheless, I am intense.
I love that thing. Well, let me say this about curiosity, since you said it. We know one of the biggest ways to get over ego is to stay curious.
Yes.
And so when anyone here that's like, when my ego gets in check, or when I start being judgy, or I start doing these behaviors, my number one thing, if you want an action about, okay, Justin, that's great, but how do I do it? Stay curious. Stay curious about, I wonder why that person reacted that way. I wonder why my partner feels that way, versus getting so stuck in my opinion that now I got to be right and I have to defend it. What would happen if we were just more curious than anything?
We have a couple more questions coming in. The first is from Laura. It looks like it starts with a comment. I often try so hard not to hurt someone in conversation that I come across as someone who doesn't have confidence. I don't know how to change that. Can you help?
Yeah. So Laura, it's interesting. I'm going to, in the chapter I wrote about around take responsibility for your energy, we talk about leadership and how some leaders only lead from their headspace. Some leaders only lead from their heart space. And then I think the best leaders that really leave a positive legacy lead with both head and heart. And it sounds like when you're talking about is typically in conversations that you only lead from your heart space. So I go in, it's so empathetic. I'm such a great, I listen so much. And what happens is when the drawback of only leading from your heart space, you don't say the things you need to say. You don't hold people accountable. And sometimes you're not direct enough in a place that they can hear it. And so if that is you and that resonates with you, Laura, my challenge to you is how do you also add a little bit more of the headspace into the conversation so it's not just the heart space stuff. So it is about owning your truth in the way that you see it. Empathy or heart space would be like, I'm not going to discount theirs, but I don't get to, I'm not going to listen to your truth at the cost of mine. It's mutual. So how do if you need boundaries in your life, how do I say this is the difference between manipulation and control versus boundary. So the difference would be like, if you don't fix this, then you're out of here. This relationship's over. I'm over it. Well, that's controlling behavior, all rooted in ego, versus for me to show up my best in this relationship, I need this. Yeah. How willing are you to do that? I'm not taking your choices away. We know as coaches, we always say that your power lies in your ability to choose. And the moment we take that away from anyone, we strip them of their power. So my choice to you, Laura, would be, first of all, don't take your own power away by removing your choices. And you have a choice to speak up, to be more assertive, to say, I hear you, and I understand why you feel that way. I just have a different perspective, and I want to share that with you. And then maybe you get to the end, and sometimes I think we have to renegotiate the relationships with people.
Yeah.
So moving forward, what does this mean? How are we going to? How are we showing up differently moving forward?
Right.
And if we don't have that clarity, then of course people don't, are kind of stuck or back in that victim mentality.
Yeah.
Last thing, since you only
keep going.
said,
I hope you're still listening, Laura,
Yeah,
because
I
you
do
know
too.
what? Everybody who's listening, we're going to go backwards because this is like a really amazing nugget. Thank you.
Yeah.
Justin. Yes.
Well, just because you were talking about confidence and we were talked about body language this morning and how there are 4 power zones on your body that display power. And some of the things I talk about, right? It's your neck dimple, it's your torso, your naughty bits. Didn't think I'd say that today. And your feet. And when you can keep all of those open, and I can look right at Jess and have that conversation. So I keep my power zones open. I look at her. I don't have to speak super quickly. I don't have to be intense, but I'm calm and collected. That comes across as confident. And do you know in the moments that you need to be that type of person, how to show up that way?
Ooh, I'm telling you. Okay, we have time for one more. And this is from Scott. Please tell me I don't have to like those people I work with. But then how do I still manage those people?
Yeah. Scott, this sounds like a one-on-one conversation.
I was going to say, where do we go? It's super deep, super deep.
Yeah.
How many layers do you want?
So here's what I would say. I'm a big believer, Scott, that in management, there are 4 fundamentals. And I'm gonna tell you why I think they're important. I'm gonna tell you what I believe they are. Number 1 is to build authentic relationships. Number 2 is to set clear expectations. 3 is to coach for performance. And number 4 is to recognize what is right. And when you say, do I have to like the people I work with? Well, what I would say is, I'm going to focus on what you can control, not what you can't control. What you can control is how you're showing up in those relationships and what are you doing to foster a relationship with those people. You're not responsible for their lack of inaction. And sometimes people are going to get under your skin, but I am going to tell you this. In coaching, they say this: I see in you what I refuse to see in myself, and so I don't like you for it. I see in other people what I refuse to see in myself, and so I don't like them for it. And what I find is when you show up with compassion and empathy, I don't always agree with your decisions, but sometimes I get, based on how you were raised, based on your level of awareness, why you do what you do. That doesn't mean we gotta be friends with everybody. I don't have to like everyone, but I can invest in the relationship. I can try to be more empathetic. And then you get to decide where you put your energy. If some people are energy vampires at work and suck in your energy, maybe there is a transactional relationship where you do the work, but you're not going to continue to engage. Yeah. But the people that are filling your bucket that you need to have a relationship with, that I'm going to be intentional about making those deposits and building the relationship.
Absolutely. There's a phrase I use called treaties, not reconciliation, because being able to accept somebody's differences, whether I'm ready to see them in myself or not, it still is so important to continue to have results, to be able to go forward and make that forward momentum. So can I set that aside and be honest, like what you said, where are they? What's going on? How are things working out so that we can get toward where we're going? We can take that next step.
I'm going to say one final thing.
Please.
Is I'm a big believer. Results are important. I want you to hear that. You are rewarded. Like, that is what makes business successful. But there will be 2 types of leaders: the leader that only cares about results and gets them at any cost, or the leaders that get results through people. Yeah. That is fundamentally a different way that we lead people. Yeah. And you get to decide, am I the leader that only leads through transactional, these transactional interactions, or am I going to focus on building relationships so that I can create trust, that I can create influence, and hopefully get more done in the long run? That decision impacts culture, engagement, everything.
And when a company embraces it all the way through, their growth actually comes from the people all the time, and they don't even understand as much that transactional piece. So are we tying the action to the budget instead of the outcome to the budget?
That is right. Here's one of the things I say when if I went into all of your companies today or organizations and I looked at your performance reviews, if there is nothing on the performance review about how people get results, that company is rewarding bad behavior. Yeah. Because what they're saying is, we don't care how you got them, as long as you get the results. That's all we care about. And they will reward bad behavior. And then what happens is we keep promoting those people all the way up the ladder. And then we wonder, and then we're in workshops wondering why culture is so bad or why engagement's bad, because you rewarded that behavior in your organization.
Yeah. Oh, think about those spoiled kids, right? Think about, you can actually think back to when you were a child. You can think about the kids that are in your life. You can think about the kids that you see when you were a teacher or out in the community. Same thing. You can see what behavior is rewarded in each of those, in each of the situations, because what's rewarded ends up becoming what's taught.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a famous line. It's very much similar to what you said. Yeah. It's what we allow, we encourage.
Yeah.
So we allow, we encourage. Personally, in our personal relationships, or professionally. When we don't hold people accountable for coming into work on time, they say, okay, I can do this. I can get away with it. When they kind of snap back at people in meetings and don't take people with them, or they're overly assertive, and we let them off the hook. They're like, I can do this. I can be a bully and get away with it.
Right. Ooh, we got to keep those hooks. That's really what happens. What makes it bold to communicate with impact?
Yeah. So when I wrote Bold New You, when I studied what the word bold mean, it was about confidence and courage. And I think if you want to change your life and change the way that you lead, it takes both confidence and courage. And that to me is bold. And it is bold, and being bold is risky.
It is.
And some people are not going to like the bold new version of you when you start showing up more confident, or you start showing up and say, you don't get to talk to me that way.
Right.
Or, that I start setting more boundaries. And sometimes those people need to fall away so better opportunities can come. But it's risky. But I also, on the other side of some of these situations, as many of you have been, I also know that confidence and courage has transformed my life into such a much more beautiful and meaningful, rich place that I would never try to go back to. The opposite of that.
Yeah. You heard it here, everybody. All right. Last comments. Send them in this direction. I'm going to we're going to take any more questions that come in, but I'm going to do our closing first. So, Scott, we're doing this a little differently. Just heads up. All right. You will find all the program notes for today's show at voiceofboldbusiness.com/P197. That's voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 197. Also, don't forget, we're going to link to Justin's book. We're going to link to, if I can find it, The Day I Stopped Saying Hurry Up, and a few other things that I made notes for in my scribbles right here. And it's your turn to keep this conversation going, because as leaders of ourselves first, as well as potentially leaders of others, we keep this conversation going because we define what it means to lead today. So rate this program wherever you're listening to it: Facebook, YouTube, iHeartRadio, iTunes, and many others that you might be listening from. Give us a shout out. Use that hashtag. Jason's going to be watching. He's actually better at social media than I am. Actually, everybody on my team would say basically everybody's better at social media than I am. But it's there, and we will be looking for those to stay in touch, to keep this going, because it's what we learn from each other. It's what we learn from our experiences that we can use to create that forward momentum, because we don't have to always have those experiences on our own. Thank you so much. And we're going to leave you with this. What can you change today to communicate for impact?
The Voice of Bold Business Radio gives you insights about how to achieve your company's growth strategy. When you aren't seeing the growth results you want, it's time to get an outside perspective. To discuss your specific situation around growth strategy, work with us. Visit voiceofboldbusiness.com and click Find Out More. Special thanks to the Scott Treatment for technical production. Thank you for joining us.